Welcome back to the deep dive. If you followed British education policy for, say, the last decade, you've heard this constant thundering noise.
Oh, absolutely.
It's all about structures, governance models, new logos, and just accountability frameworks. It feels endless.
But here's the profound disconnect that really struck us when we were looking at this material. For all that talk about system architecture, we almost never talk seriously, at a policy level, about the people.
The ones actually delivering the service?
Exactly. The teachers, the support staff, the technicians, the head teachers, they're the ones in the classroom, day in and day out, trying to keep this promise of a world-class education alive.
Absolutely. And if decades of, relentless structural reform were meant to be the fix, our mission today is to look at the reality those reforms quietly created for the workforce. We have to stop ignoring what the sources are calling the human deficit.
And treat it as seriously as any financial shortfall.
Right.
And the picture, I have to say, it's not just challenging. It's frankly alarming. Our analysis, it points to 5 core interconnected issues that have just collapsed into one full-blown crisis.
And was predicted.
It was. The system was warned years ago. You got pay falling, workload rising, recruitment collapsing, retention evaporating, and, the vacancies are now at record highs.
Okay, so let's unpack this. If we really want to understand the crisis, we have to start where it hurts the most, which is the salary. So, part 1, teacher pay and this grim reality of the long slide downwards. Here is the headline fact that should honestly shock everyone. Teacher pay today is still below 2010 levels in real terms, even after the recent attempts to play catch-up.
And what's fascinating here is the specific detail really illustrates this. This political failure to value experience. Even when you account for the 2022 to 2025 pay settlements, the profession is still significantly worse off.
How much worse off?
Well, if we look at the specific real terms, cuts, the sources documented, a teacher in the middle of their career, what they call a main scale teacher, is down roughly 9 to 10%.
That's bad enough. But here is the truly damaging figure for the longevity of the profession. The most experienced teachers are down around a staggering 13% in real terms.
13%. It creates a huge distortion, doesn't it? It means we've actively decided through policy to pay the institutional memory of a school less than we did before.
And these are the people mentoring new recruits.
Exactly. They mentor the new staff, they manage complex departments, they hold the whole school culture together, and they get a 13% real terms pay cut. Meanwhile, higher responsibility posts, and they're often still negative after inflation too.
And the analysis we reviewed points out, quite bluntly, that every other sector talks about competitive labor markets. But education somehow pretends its professionals are, mysteriously immune to basic economics.
Right. It's just a predictable market outcome, isn't it, when you suppress wages in a crucial sector for that long?
What happens?
Well, exactly what you'd expect. Fewer people join, the ones who do train leave really quickly, and the veterans who stay. They're just forced to work so much harder to stay afloat. We see it in the government's own data. Recruitment targets missed year after year after year.
And we're not talking about niche subjects here. We're talking about the absolute backbone of a modern economy. Maths, physics, chemistry, computer science. The source, it dryly notes these are just small, insignificant subjects.
A bit of sarcasm there, I think.
Just a bit.
Yeah.
But seriously, if you can't recruit enough people to teach core science and technology, how do you possibly deliver a world-class education system? It's fundamentally unsustainable.
Which brings us directly to the consequence of that pay decline.
Right.
This structural crisis of recruitment and retention. This isn't a temporary blip. It's not post-COVID weirdness.
Right.
The shortage is structural because the profession is, for many, no longer economically viable.
That distinction is so key. What does it mean for you, the listener, when we say the shortage is structural?
It means the system is basically designed to fail at staffing itself. Secondary recruitment targets are missed over and over, and the consequence is visible in every staff room. You have vacancies and unfilled posts at the highest level since records began.
And when a post is unfilled, the work doesn't just vanish.
No, it lands on the desks of the staff who are still there.
And the retention failure is, in some ways, even more heartbreaking. It's the exodus. We see a huge chunk of teachers leaving the profession in the first, 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, right after we've invested all that money in training them.
Yeah.
And like we just said, the experienced teachers, the really invaluable ones, are burning out and just stepping away. They realize they can have a better, easier living somewhere else.
Heads are reporting crisis levels, staff churn.
And just think about the impact of that on a child's education. Constant staff changes. It disrupts everything. Curriculum, departmental cohesion. It's just impossible to build any kind of institutional stability.
And all this is happening while the job itself is getting way more complex. The sources paint this picture where every single pressure point is tightening at once.
Yes. If you connect this to the bigger picture, you see why schools feel like they're collapsing. You've got more pupils with complex needs coming into the system.
But less support for them.
Exactly. Less specialized provision for special educational needs, SAT. Safeguarding responsibilities are constantly rising. Pastoral teams are stripped back. And the behavioral challenges, especially post-pandemic, are so much more severe.
So you have fewer people with less institutional experience handling profoundly more complex and demanding duties than ever before. It's a formula for exhaustion.
It is. The analysis we looked at, it summarizes it with this damning, concise conclusion that you really need to remember. We've asked teachers to do more with less for less pay. This is not a mystery. This is maths.
The equation just doesn't balance.
Not for long-term stability, not in any professional workforce.
And that lack of money, that lack of capacity, it's only bearable if the job itself is manageable. Which brings us right to the workload elephant in the room. Teachers didn't just get a pay cut. They also inherited this massive and relentless workload inflation.
And this inflation comes in the form of constant bureaucratic expectation. When you look at the specific demands that have piled up, it's staggering.
What kind of things are we talking about?
We're talking micromanaged lesson planning, complex marking policies, multiple data drops that require hours of logging, intervention tracking, endless safeguarding logs, constant curriculum rewrites, and new behavior systems, often with zero training time.
And what's so remarkable about this never-ending reform churn, is that new responsibilities are always added, new checklists, new metrics. The old ones never seem to be taken away.
No, it just piles up. It piles up on the existing staff until they crack.
This really raises a fundamental question, doesn't it? About the nature of accountability. Why is the policy response always to add another layer of paperwork, another observation, rather than just trusting the professionals?
Well, the union quotes from the source material absolutely nail that mindset. One of them stated, "We replaced trust with paperwork and called it progress."
That's the accountability trap, perfectly put. It's progress for a politician who can say they're tracking data, but it's death by 1,000 cuts for the teacher.
And that paperwork, it requires time. When staff are already handling higher complexity and the pay isn't keeping up, where do those extra hours come from?
Evenings, weekends.
Their own time. Exactly. There's another quote that just captures the sheer fragility of the whole operation. You can't run a school on goodwill forever.
And yet, that is precisely what the system has been doing, isn't it? It has been running on the dedication of people who will work extra unpaid hours for the sake of the kids they teach.
And that goodwill, the sources are suggesting, is now effectively exhausted.
And that exhaustion ripples out. It goes beyond the classroom teacher. It leads to leadership burnout.
It does.
Which takes us right into the invisible infrastructure of schools, which is part 4 of our deep dive. We focus so much on the teacher, but schools only function because of this whole ecosystem of support staff.
The teaching assistants, pastoral teams, SEN specialists, lab technicians, finance officers, the list goes on. If this infrastructure fails, the whole school fails.
And these support roles face the same brutal pressures, I assume. Real terms pay cuts, increasing demand?
Absolutely. But often their pay is even more drastically out of step with their responsibilities. TAs, for example, are often paid wages closer to minimum wage or what you'd get in a supermarket.
Even while they're expected to deal with the most challenging special educational needs.
And critical safeguarding issues. It's an incredible cognitive dissonance. You're asking a staff member to manage a child with profound needs, maybe administer medication, handle highly sensitive issues, but paying them a salary that implies it's an unskilled job.
The source material, it encapsulates this problem with a really stark summary. It says, "We run a 21st century school system on 1990s support budgets."
The system has been actively hollowed out. TA hours have been cut or frozen at precisely the moment when complex social and educational needs are soaring post-pandemic.
And that hollowing out goes straight to the top. Head teachers describe the last decade not as a time of educational innovation, but as a continuous cycle of budget stress, trying to manage severe staff shortages, navigating unmanageable accountability, and just constant debilitating policy churn.
They describe themselves, and this is very telling, not as educational visionaries, but as crisis managers.
What does that mean in practice?
It means their time is spent solving infrastructural problems, finding a supply teacher, figuring out who can cover the missing TA slot, trying to get the heating fixed, rather than focusing on improving teaching and learning.
What's most astonishing is that the warnings about this collapse were ignored for so long. This wasn't a surprise.
Not at all. Bodies representing school leadership, like NAHT and ASCL, the main unions for heads, they've repeatedly detailed this systemic failure. They've highlighted that capital funding is catastrophically inadequate.
The leaking roof analogy.
Right. You can't run a world-class system with a leaking roof. They warned specifically that legal duties and complexity were rising exponentially faster than the resources provided to meet them.
So this was never just an ideological argument from teachers asking for more money.
No. The unions representing the entire sector, the NEU, the NASAT, the head teacher bodies, they were precise. They warned about pay, about the need for competitive salaries, about the disaster looming over the school estate. They were issuing these warnings about system failure years before it became the reality we see now.
Warnings, as the source grimly notes, that we didn't take seriously until the roof beams literally started falling in.
Which leads us to this undeniable crisis point.
And that brings us to part 5, fixing the workforce crisis. If the stated policy goal in Britain is achieving high-quality outcomes, smaller class sizes, modern buildings, better results, proper SEN provision.
All the good stuff.
Right. The source is absolutely clear. None of that works unless the workforce crisis is fixed first.
You cannot innovate your way out of a staffing shortage. It's impossible. You can build all the new structures and frameworks you want, but if you don't have enough well-paid, well-supported professionals to stand in front of the kids, it's just an empty political promise.
So, based on the research, what does this comprehensive reset actually look like?
It's basically 5 essential steps. Number 1, the immediate restoration of real terms teacher pay. That 9 to 13% deficit has to be closed.
And number 2?
Number 2, you have to offer competitive salaries in shortage subjects, like science and computing, to pull the best talent away from industry. Number 3, and this is crucial, stabilizing and simplifying workload, removing the paperwork deficit instead of adding to it.
Okay, that makes sense.
4 is fixing leadership burnout by giving heads the resources to manage, not just crises. And 5, rebuilding the essential support staff capacity that has been, frankly, intentionally hollowed out.
It's an acknowledgement that the human element isn't a cost center to be minimized. It's the core infrastructure you have to invest in.
That is the central argument that needs to stick with you. The sector has been told for a decade that structure and accountability matter most. But you simply cannot build a world-class education system on a workforce that feels systematically undervalued, underpaid, overworked, and structurally ignored.
It's antithetical to building a world-class public service.
It is. You can't ignore the fundamentals of employment pay and working conditions and expect excellence.
As we wrap up this deep dive, it feels important to connect this workforce crisis to the next logical step mentioned in the material: calculating the real price tag.
Absolutely. Everything we've discussed, pay restoration, recruitment incentives, retention packages, and critically SEN capacity expansion, it all adds significant new costs.
So any previous calculation is now out of date.
Completely. Any initial modeling that tried to calculate the cost of providing what they term a universal private level education has to be redone. It has to factor in the cost of first fixing this human deficit.
So what does this failure, this exhaustion of the goodwill budget in education, what does it imply about our public services more broadly?
I think that's the ultimate provocative thought here. If the economic fundamentals of a crucial profession like education can be ignored for decades, just in favor of focusing on structural accountability and paperwork because it's politically easier,
Right.
what does that imply about how we value long-term stability versus short-term political reform? And what other essential public services, healthcare, policing, social care, what others might be running on similar goodwill budgets right now, just waiting for their own structural failure to become undeniable?
That structural reliance on goodwill, that is a profound and frankly frightening reality to leave with you. Thank you for joining us for this crucial deep dive into the human deficit that is defining education right now. We'd encourage you to keep exploring the implications of treating your essential workforce as an afterthought.